Hello, welcome back. It's Wednesday. Let's continue reading. So this is not that English vlog, it's just a reading video. It's 10 a.m. and I've just continued reading about India, Himalayan mountains, Tibetan, Bangladesh, Pakistan. So let's read the Himalaya. That's important for India because they're getting the water to the rivers from the Himalayas, like the Ganges and Yamuna and many other rivers. I need a minute to go to my bed.
Himalayas. This article is about a mountain range. For other uses, see Himalaya, disambiguation. The Himalayas, or Himalaya, /HML.HMLJ/Himlay, HIHMAHLY, is a mountain range in Asia, separating the plains of the Indian subcontinent from the Tibetan plateau. The range has some of the Earth's highest peaks, including the highest, Mount Everest, more than 100 peaks exceeding elevations of 7,200 m, 23,600 feet, above sea level lie in the Himalayas. The Himalayas abut or cross 5 countries, Nepal, China, Pakistan, Bhutan and India. The sovereignty of
Yes, sir. Let's try again.
Himalayas. This article is about a mountain range. For other uses, see Himalaya, disambiguation. The Himalayas, or Himalaya, /HML.HMLJ/Himlay, HIHMAHLY, is a mountain range in Asia, separating the plains of the Indian subcontinent from the Tibetan plateau. The range has some of the Earth's highest peaks, including the highest, Mount Everest, more than 100 peaks exceeding elevations of 7,200 m, 23,600 feet, above sea level lie in the Himalayas. The Himalayas abut or cross 5 countries, Nepal, China, Pakistan, Bhutan and India. The sovereignty of the range in the Kashmir region is disputed among India, Pakistan, and China. The Himalayan range is bordered on the northwest by the Karakoram and Hindu Kush ranges, on the north by the Tibetan Plateau, and on the south by the Indo-Gangetic Plain. Some of the world's major rivers, the Indus, the Ganges, and the Sangpo-Brahmaputra, rise in the vicinity of the Himalayas, and their combined drainage basin is home to some 600 million people. 53 million people live in the Himalayas. The Himalayas have profoundly shaped the cultures of South Asia and Tibet. Many Himalayan peaks are sacred in Hinduism and Buddhism. The summits of several, Kanchenjunga, from the Indian side, Gangkar-Puensum, Makar-Pakar, Nanda Devi, and Kailash in the Tibetan Trans-Himalaya, are off-limits to climbers. Lifted by the subduction of the Indian tectonic plate under the Eurasian plate, the Himalayan mountain range runs west-northwest to east-southeast in an arc 2,400 kilometers, 1,500 mi, long. Its western anchor, Nanga Parbat, lies just south of the northernmost bend of the Indus River. Its eastern anchor, Nam Shabewa, lies immediately west of the Great Bend of the Yolong-Sangpo River. The range varies in width from 350 kilometers, 220 mi, in the west to 150 kilometers, 93 mi, in the east. Name, edit. The name of the range hails from the Sanskrit Himalaya, abode of snow, from Hima, frost / cold, and Laya, dwelling / house. They are now known as the Himalaya Mountains, usually shortened to the Himalayas. The mountains are known as the Himalaya in Nepali and Hindi, both written, in Kumani, the Himalaya, or the Land of Snow, in Tibetan, also known as Himalaya in Sinhala, written as the Himalaya Mountain Range, in Urdu, the Himalaya Parvatmala, in Bengali, and the Himalaya Mountain Range, simplified Chinese, traditional Chinese, Pinyin, XMLA with Macron Waishumi, in Chinese. The name of the range is sometimes also given as Imavan in older writings, including the Sanskrit epic Mahabharata. Imavat, Sanskrit, or Imavan Imavan, Sanskrit, is a Hindu deity who is the personification of the Himalayan mountain range. Other epithets include Himraja, Sanskrit, lit. King of Snow, or Parvateswara, Sanskrit, lit. Lord of Mountains. In Western literature, some writers refer to it as the Himalaya. This was also previously transcribed as Himalaya, as in Emily Dickinson's poetry and Henry David Thoreau's essays. Geography and key features, edit. See also, list of Himalayan peaks and passes and Himalayan rim. The Himalayas consists of 4 parallel mountain ranges from south to north. The Sivalek Hills on the south, the Lower Himalayan Range, the Great Himalayas, which is the highest and central range, and the Tibetan Himalayas on the north. The Karakoram are generally considered separate from the Himalayas. In the middle of the great curve of the Himalayan mountains lie the 8,000 m, 26,000 feet, peaks of Dhaulagiri and Annapurna in Nepal, separated by the Kali Gandaki Gorge. The gorge splits the Himalayas into western and eastern sections. Both ecologically and orographically, the pass at the head of the Kali Gandaki, the Korala, is the lowest point on the ridgeline between Everest and K2, the highest peak of the Karakoram range. To the east of Annapurna are the 8,000 m, 5.0 mi, peaks of Manaslu, and across the border in Tibet, Shishapanma. To the south of these lies Kathmandu, the capital of Nepal and the largest city in the Himalayas. East of the Kathmandu Valley lies the valley of the Put/Sun Kosi River, which rises in Tibet and provides the main overland route between Nepal and China, the Araniko Highway/China National Highway 318. Further east is the Mahalanga Himal with 4 of the world's 6 highest mountains, including the highest, Choi, Everest, Lhos, and Mekalu. The Khumbu region, popular for trekking, is found here on the southwestern approaches to Everest. The Arun River drains the northern slopes of these mountains, before turning south and flowing to the range to the east of Mekalu. In the far east of Nepal, the Himalayas rise to the Kanchenjunga Massif on the border with India, the 3rd highest mountain in the world, the most easterly 8,000 m, 26,000 feet, summit and the highest point of India. The eastern side of Kanchenjunga is in the Indian state of Sikkim. Formerly an independent kingdom, it lies on the main route from India to Lhasa, Tibet, which passes over the Nathula Pass into Tibet. East of Sikkim lies the ancient Buddhist kingdom of Bhutan. The highest mountain in Bhutan is Gangkhar Puensum, which is also a strong candidate for the highest unclimbed mountain in the world. The Himalayas here are becoming increasingly rugged, with heavily forested steep valleys. The Himalayas continue, turning slightly northeast, through the Indian state of Arunachal Pradesh as well as Tibet. before reaching their easterly conclusion in the peak of Namche Berwa, situated in Tibet, inside the Great Bend of the Yolane Sangpo River. On the other side of the Sangpo, to the east, are the Kangri Gapo Mountains. The high mountains to the north of the Sangpo, including Gyalapiri, however, are also sometimes included in the Himalayas. Going west from Dhaulagiri, western Nepal is somewhat remote and lacks major high mountains, but is home to Rara Lake, the largest lake in Nepal. The Karnali River rises in Tibet but cuts through the center of the region. Further west, the border with India follows the Sada River and provides a trade route into China, where on the Tibetan plateau lies the high peak of Gurla Mandata. Just across Lake Manasarovar from this lies the sacred Mount Kailash in the Kailash Ranges, which stands close to the source of the four main rivers of Himalayas and is revered in Hinduism, Jainism, Buddhism, Sufism and Bonpo. In Uttarakhand, the Himalayas are regionally divided into the Kumaon and Garhwal Himalayas with the high peaks of Nanda Devi and Kamat. The state is also home to the important pilgrimage destinations of Shotakadam, with Gangotri, the source of the holy river Ganges, Yamunotri, the source of the river Yamuna, and the temples at Badrinath and Kedarnath. The next Himalayan Indian state, Himachal Pradesh, is noted for its hill stations, particularly Shimla, the summer capital of the British Raj, and Dharamsala, the center of the Tibetan community and government in exile in India. This area marks the start of the Punjab Himalaya and the Sutlej River, the most easterly of the 5 tributaries of the Indus, cuts through the range here. Further west, the Himalayas form much of the disputed Indian-administered Union territory of Jammu and Kashmir, where lie the mountainous Jammu region and the renowned Kashmir Valley with the town and lakes of Srinagar. The Himalayas form most of the southwest portion of the disputed Indian-administered Union territory of Ladakh. The twin peaks of Nunkun are the only mountains over 7,000 m, 4.3 mi, in this part of the Himalayas. Finally, the Himalayas reach their western end in the dramatic 8,000 m peak of Nanga Parbat, which rises over 8,000 m, 26,000 feet, above the Indus Valley and is the most westerly of the 8,000 m summits. The western end terminates at a magnificent point near Nanga Parbat where the Himalayas intersect with the Karakoram and Hindu Kush ranges, in the disputed Pakistani-administered territory of Gilgit-Baltistan. Some portion of the Himalayas, such as the Kagan Valley, Margala Hills, and Galyat Tract, extend into the Pakistani provinces of Khyber Pakhtunkhwa and Punjab. Geology, edit. Main article, Geology of the Himalayas. The Himalayan range is one of the youngest mountain ranges on the planet and consists mostly of uplifted sedimentary and metamorphic rock. According to the modern theory of plate tectonics, its formation is a result of a continental collision or orogeny along the convergent boundary, main Himalayan thrust, between the Indo-Australian plate and the Eurasian plate. The Arakanyoma Highlands in Myanmar and the Andaman and Nicobar Islands in the Bay of Bengal were also formed as a result of this collision. During the Upper Cretaceous, about 70 million years ago, the north-moving Indo-Australian plate, which has subsequently broken into the Indian plate and the Australian plate, was moving at about 15 centimeters, 5.9 in, per year. About 50 million years ago this fast-moving Indo-Australian plate had completely closed the Tethys Ocean, the existence of which has been determined by sedimentary rocks settled on the ocean floor and the volcanoes that fringed its edges. Since both plates were composed of low-density continental crust, they were thrust-faulted and folded into mountain ranges rather than subducting into the mantle along an oceanic trench. An often cited fact used to illustrate this process is that the summit of Mount Everest is made of unmetamorphosed marine Ordovician limestone with fossil trilobites, crinoids, and ostracods from this ancient ocean. Today, The Indian plate continues to be driven horizontally at the Tibetan plateau, which forces the plateau to continue to move upwards. The Indian plate is still moving at 67 millimeters, 2.6 in, per year, and over the next 10 million years, it will travel about 1,500 kilometers, 930 mi, into Asia. About 20 millimeters per year of the India-Asia convergence is absorbed by thrusting along the Himalayas southern front. This leads to the Himalayas rising by about 5 millimeters per year, making them geologically active. The movement of the Indian plate into the Asian plate also makes this region seismically active, leading to earthquakes from time to time. During the last ice age, there was a connected ice stream of glaciers between Kanchenjunga in the east and Nanga Parbat in the west. In the west, the glaciers joined with the ice stream network in the Karakoram, and in the north, they joined with the former Tibetan inland ice. To the south, outflow glaciers came to an end below an elevation of 1,0002,000 m, 3,306,600 foot. While the current valley glaciers of the Himalaya reach at most 20 to 32 kilometers, 12 to 20 mi, in length, several of the main valley glaciers were 60 to 112 kilometers, 37 to 70 mi, long during the Ice Age. The glacier snowline, the altitude where accumulation and ablation of a glacier are balanced, was about 1,400 1,660 m, 4,595 450 foot, lower than it is today. Thus, the climate was at least 7.0 to 8.3 degrees Celsius, 12.6 to 14.9 degrees Fahrenheit, colder than it is today. Hydrology, edit. Despite their scale, the Himalayas do not form a major continental divide, and a number of rivers cut through the range, particularly in the eastern part of the range. As a result, the main ridge of the Himalayas is not clearly defined, and mountain passes are not as significant for traversing the range as with other mountain ranges. Himalayas rivers drain into two large systems. One, the western rivers combine into the Indus Basin. The Indus itself forms the northern and western boundaries of the Himalayas. It begins in Tibet, at the confluence of Sangh and Gar rivers, and flows northwest through India into Pakistan before turning southwest to the Arabian Sea. It is fed by several major tributaries draining the southern slopes of the Himalayas, including the Jhelum, Chenab, Ravi, Beas, and Sutlej rivers, the five rivers of the Punjab. Two the other Himalayan rivers drain the Ganges-Brahmaputra basin. Its main rivers are the Ganges, the Brahmaputra, and the Yamuna, as well as other tributaries. The Brahmaputra originates as the Yolung Tsangpo River in western Tibet, and flows east through Tibet and west through the plains of Assam. The Ganges and the Brahmaputra meet in Bangladesh and drain into the Bay of Bengal through the world's largest river delta, the Sundarbans. The northern slopes of Jeolapuri and the peaks beyond the Tsangpo, sometimes included in the Himalayas, drain into the Irrawaddy River, which originates in eastern Tibet and flows south through Myanmar to drain into the Andaman Sea. The Salween, Mekong, Yangtze, and Yellow River all originate from parts of the Tibetan Plateau that are geologically distinct from the Himalayan mountains and are therefore not considered true Himalayan rivers. Some geologists refer to all the rivers collectively as the circum-Himalayan rivers. Glaciers, edit. The Great Ranges of Central Asia, including the Himalayas, contain the third largest deposit of ice and snow in the world, after Antarctica and the Arctic. Some even refer to this region as the third pole. The Himalayan range encompasses about 15,000 glaciers, which store about 12,000 kilometers, 2,900 cm, or 3,600 4,400 gt, 10 kilograms, of fresh water. Its glaciers include the Gangotri and Yamunotri, Uttarakhand, and Khumbu glaciers, Mount Everest region, Langtang Glacier, Langtang region, and Zemu, Sikkim. Owing to the mountain's latitude near the Tropic of Cancer, the permanent snow line is among the highest in the world, at typically around 5,500 m, 18,000 feet. In contrast, equatorial mountains in New Guinea, the Windsors, and Colombia have a snow line some 900 m, 2,950 feet, lower. The higher regions of the Himalayas are snowbound throughout the year, in spite of their proximity to the tropics, and they form the sources of several large perennial rivers. Icefall on Khumbu Glacier. In recent years, scientists have monitored a notable increase in the rate of glacier retreat across the region as a result of climate change. For example, glacial lakes have been forming rapidly on the surface of debris-covered glaciers in the Bhutan Himalaya during the last few decades. Studies have measured an approximately 13% overall decrease in glacial coverage in the Himalayas over the last 40-50 years. Local conditions play a large role in glacial retreat, however, and glacial loss can vary locally from a few m/yr to 61 m/yr. A marked acceleration in glacial mass loss has also been observed since 1975, from about 513 gt/yr to 1624 gt/yr. Although the effect of this will not be known for many years, it potentially could mean disaster for the hundreds of millions of people who rely on the glaciers to feed the rivers during the dry seasons. The global climate change will affect the water resources and livelihoods of the greater Himalayan region. Lakes, edit. See also, list of alpine lakes in India. The Himalayan region is dotted with hundreds of lakes. Pangong Tso, which is spread across the border between India and China, at the far western end of Tibet, is among the largest with a surface area of 700 kilometers, 270 square mi. South of the main range, the lakes are smaller. Tilaicho Lake in Nepal, in the Annapurna Massif, is one of the highest lakes in the world. Other lakes include Rara Lake in western Nepal, Shifuk Sundu Lake in the Shifuk Sundu National Park of Nepal, Guru Dongma Lake, in North Sikkim, Gokyo Lakes in Soluk Khumbu district of Nepal, and Lake Tsongmo, near the Indo-China border in Sikkim. Some of the lakes present the danger of a glacial lake outburst flood. The Chirolpa Glacier Lake in the Rolling Valley, in the Dalaka district of Nepal, is rated as the most dangerous. The lake, which is located at an altitude of 4,580 m, 15,030 feet, has grown considerably over the last 50 years due to glacial melting. The mountain lakes are known to geographers as tarns if they are caused by glacial activity. Tarns are found mostly in the upper reaches of the Himalaya, above 5,500 m, 18,000 feet. Temperate Himalayan wetlands provide important habitat and layover sites for migratory birds. Many mid and low altitude lakes remain poorly studied in terms of their hydrology and biodiversity, like Keshirpuri in the Sikkim Eastern Himalayas. Climate, edit. Temperature, edit. The physical factors determining the climate in any location in the Himalayas include latitude, altitude, and the relative motion of the southwest monsoon. From north to south, the mountains cover more than 8 degrees of latitude, spanning temperate to subtropical zones. The colder air of Central Asia is prevented from blowing down into South Asia by the physical configuration of the Himalayas. This causes the tropical zone to extend farther north in South Asia than anywhere else in the world. The evidence is unmistakable in the Brahmaputra Valley as the warm air from the Bay of Bengal bottlenecks and rushes up past Namcha Berwa, the eastern anchor of the Himalayas, and into southeastern Tibet. Temperatures in the Himalayas cool by 2.0 degrees Celsius, 3.6 degrees Fahrenheit, for every 300 meters, 980 feet, increase of altitude. As the physical features of mountains are irregular, with broken jagged contours, there can be wide variations in temperature over short distances. Temperature at a location on a mountain depends on the season of the year, the bearing of the sun with respect to the face on which the location lies, and the mass of the mountain, i.e. the amount of matter in the mountain. As the temperature is directly proportional to received radiation from the sun, the faces that receive more direct sunlight also have a greater heat build-up. In narrow valleys, lying between steep mountain faces, there can be dramatically different weather along their two margins. The side to the north with a mountain above facing south can have an extra month of the growing season. The mass of the mountain also influences the temperature, as it acts as a heat island, in which more heat is absorbed and retained than the surroundings, and therefore influences the heat budget or the amount of heat needed to raise the temperature from the winter minimum to the summer maximum. The immense scale of the Himalayas means that many summits can create their own weather, the temperature fluctuating from one summit to another, from one face to another, and all may be quite different from the weather in nearby plateaus or valleys. Precipitation, edit. A critical influence on the Himalayan climate is the southwest monsoon. This is not so much the rain of the summer months as the wind that carries the rain. Different rates of heating and cooling between the Central Asian continent and the Indian Ocean create large differences in the atmospheric pressure prevailing above each. In the winter, a high-pressure system forms and remains suspended above Central Asia, forcing air to flow in the southerly direction over the Himalayas. But in Central Asia, as there is no substantial source for water to be diffused as vapor, the winter winds blowing across South Asia are dry. In the summer months, the Central Asian plateau heats up more than the ocean waters to its south. As a result, the air above it rises higher and higher, creating a thermal low. Offshore high-pressure systems in the Indian Ocean push the moist summer air inland toward the low-pressure system. When the moist air meets mountains, it rises, and upon subsequent cooling, its moisture condenses and is released as rain, typically heavy rain. The wet summer monsoon winds cause precipitation in India and all along the layered southern slopes of the Himalayas. This forced lifting of air is called the orographic effect. Winds, edit. The vast size, huge altitude range, and complex topography of the Himalayas mean they experience a wide range of climates, from humid subtropical in the foothills, to cold and dry desert conditions on the Tibetan side of the range. For much of the Himalayas, in the areas to the south of the high mountains, the monsoon is the most characteristic feature of the climate and causes most of the precipitation, while the western disturbance brings winter precipitation, especially in the west. Heavy rain arrives on the southwest monsoon in June and persists until September. The monsoon can seriously impact transport and cause major landslides. It restricts tourism. The trekking and mountaineering season is limited to either before the monsoon in April/May or after the monsoon in October/November, autumn. In Nepal and Sikkim, there are often considered to be 5 seasons: summer, monsoon, autumn, or post-monsoon, winter, and spring. Using the Köppen climate classification, the lower elevations of the Himalayas, reaching in mid-elevations in central Nepal, including the Kathmandu Valley, are classified as Kwa, a humid subtropical climate with dry winters. Higher up, most of the Himalayas have a subtropical highland climate, CWB. The intensity of the southwest monsoon diminishes as it moves westward along the range, with as much as 2,030 mm, 80 in, of rainfall in the monsoon season in Darjeeling in the east, compared to only 975 millimeters, 38.4 in, during the same period in Shimla in the west. The northern side of the Himalayas, also known as the Tibetan Himalaya, is dry, cold, and generally windswept, particularly in the west where it has a cold desert climate. The vegetation is sparse and stunted and the winters are severely cold. Most of the precipitation in the region is in the form of snow during the late winter and spring months. Local impacts on climate